Hello everybody, and you're all very welcome back to the channel. So in this video, it's the first, I will say, of our top 10 of each particular make and manufacturer of tractors. So I've done plenty of top 10s before. Anyone that's used to watching my videos will know I've done plenty of top 10s before, but this is going to be manufacturer or make specific. I've done lots of videos on different manufacturers and different makes of tractors, and it was more so about the companies, about the the history of the company. But I've decided now that I'm going to look back over a lot of all those manufacturers, a lot of those makes, and I'm going to do what I believe, or what you believe. This is where I'm going to need a lot of help from a lot of my viewers of what is the top 10 tractors within that manufacturer's lineup. Now, for me to do the John Deere one was pretty easy. I didn't need a whole lot of help. I know the models pretty well at this stage, pretty much inside out, figuratively speaking, and physically speaking as well. I've been in and out of a lot of them. So to do the John Deere one for me was pretty easy, and that's why the John Deere one is first. Now, the next one I'm going to do is going to be the Massey Ferguson one. Now, I know a little bit about the Massey Fergusons, as everybody knows, but not to the extent that some people who watch this channel. So that's where I need help. So my next video is going to be on Massey Ferguson. So I need people to drop into the comments of what they think is their top 10 Massey Ferguson ever built. Top 10 Massey Ferguson. Now, what I tried to do when I was compiling this list of John Deere was try not to let my emotions get in the way of common sense. And there are going to be a lot of tractors, not a lot, but a few tractors left out of this lineup that people are going to be surprised at, and people are going to be like, yeah, it's not a proper lineup unless it has such and such a tractor. But you have to take your emotions out of it, and you have to look at it from a practical point of view, and for what that model meant to the company at the time, as regards development and its place in the market, and what it done for that manufacturer within the market. That's what I've tried to do. Obviously, ones that have been the most reliable, that have sold the most, that have been a good basic all-rounder to a certain degree. There's one or two here that wouldn't fit that category, but yeah. So I'm starting off with John Deere, but please, in the comments, I need your help for next week for Massey Ferguson. Sorry, not for next week, but for next month. I'm doing one of these videos every month. So over the next month, people can drop me a comment. So yeah, I'm starting off with John Deere. Now, it's going to be a quick fire. Top 10, I'm starting at number 10. And number 10 for me was the Model D. So the Model D was introduced in 1923. And it is actually the tractor that had the longest production run of any John Deere tractor. And it ran up until 1953. So it had a production span of 30 years, colossal. And obviously it came in a lot of different forms. A lot of them started off on steel wheels, with steel lug wheels, into rubber wheels, and then pneumatic tires. It saw great development through the years, but it came at a point in history, in time, when you were moving out of horse-drawn, implements. Steam-powered was being left behind, and we were really getting into the internal combustion engine. It was a real revolution within farming circles and in the industry, especially in America. The Model D was hugely successful in America, and is what set John Deere on the road to success that they have today. Obviously, whether you like them or not, but down through the years, they've been massively successful. Biggest manufacturer, obviously, of farm equipment in the world. So yeah, the Model D, it had an 8.2 litre, two-cylinder petrol engine. It was 40, or gas as they say in America, 42 horsepower. It had a 3-speed crash gearbox. And as I said, it was built from 1923 to 1953. So a 30-year span. I'm not just sure how many were built altogether. So if anybody wants to drop in the comments if they know exactly, any of you American people now that obviously have a lot more experience with Model Ds than what I would have. I've seen a few of them all right. Please let me know how many have been built. But yeah, the Model D comes in at number 10. Hugely important tractor for John Deere. Number 9, anyone that is familiar with John Deere from the 70s and 80s is going to be very familiar with the next one, and that is the 3140. So 3140 at the time in Europe was the largest of the 6-cylinder tractors European built. So the 3140, that came with that very, very famous 5.9 litre six-cylinder engine at 97 horsepower, thereabouts. Initially, the first production run was 1981 to 1987. 1980 to 1981 was the first run of them. So they would have came with the OPU cab. So that was that square cab with the sliding windows and the center shift gear levers. Fantastic tractor. Sold all throughout Ireland, the UK, Europe. A huge, important tractor for John Deere at the time when they were trying to get a foothold in Europe on that higher horsepower category tractor, as it would have been. Obviously then, in 1981, the SG2 cab came out and there was a reinvention of the 3140 with the SG2 cab, and it ran up until the introduction of the 50 series in 1987. So it was normally aspirated six-cylinder. It was the bigger brother, obviously, of the 3040, and 3140 then would have been replaced, I suppose, when you look at the line above the 50 series. The 3350 would have replaced the 3140. The 3640 would have came later in the lineup. It would have came later towards 95 to 97, something like that, just before the introduction of the 50 series, when the 3650 came in and took over from it. So the 3140 was a hugely popular tractor and a very, very important tractor within Europe, maybe not so much within the UK, but within Europe, especially in Ireland and the UK, it was a very, very popular tractor, very important tractor for John Deere. And then number 8, we're moving on. So this is the newest tractor I have on the list. So I tried to keep it to tractors within that had been built in the last 15 years. So nothing, that had been much fresher than 15 years. So the next tractor was the 6155M. So the 6155M was introduced in 2015. 2015, sorry, 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. Thereabouts 10 years. 2015 to 2024. So 6155M, 6.8 litre, the very, very famous 6.8 litre six-cylinder turbocharged tractor, 155 horsepower, boosting up to 165 horsepower. And then the last of the couple of models, 172 horsepower. So the M series was the basic spec. Obviously, the R was the premium spec in that lineup. So it would have been a great all-rounder. Smaller chassis than the larger 6210s and that 6210 Rs and that. It was a smaller chassis. Very popular with stockmen and with contractors. Small enough. Some tillage men would have had it as well, obviously, maybe on lighter duties, spraying, maybe on a fertilizer spreader or a destoner or something like that. It would have been popular enough with tillage men, but especially with contractors. So silage men, slurry men, 6155M, there was a world of them sold. A very, very basic tractor. So the cab would have been similar to the 30 series, very, very similar cab to the 30 series, pretty much the same as the 30 series. Couple of changes on them. Obviously a different bonnet. 6155M is just basically, it's a 630 in fresher looking clothes. But yeah, sold really, really well in Ireland. They never came in 50k, they only up to 40k. But as I said, yeah, contractors tractor, a lot of contractors would have bought 6155, and it was a very, very important tractor. Next on the line, number 7, the 7530. Now, a lot of people are going to turn their nose up the 30 series because they had certain issues with head gaskets and stuff like that. Again, the 6.8 litre six-cylinder, 180 horsepower, came with power quad and the auto power transmission. 7530 in premium. Then I think they only came in premium. They had a production run from 07 to 2011, I think it was. Yeah, 2011. Before the new range come in. So 7530 is the bigger brother of the 6930. Very similar tractor, but bigger, beefier tractor, heavier tractor, weighed a good bit more than a 6930. Very comfortable on the road. Had obviously cab and front suspension, TLS on the front. Very good in the field. So a great all-round tractor. It would be just as happy with a 5 for a reversible or a 6 for a semi-mounted reversible plough as it would be on the road pulling a load of silage or a load of grain or on a big square baler. Plenty of horsepower. A lot of them were tipped up. They were 180 horsepower. A lot of them were tipped up to around the 200 mark very, very easily. And once you got the EGR and head gasket issues on them sorted out, there was never an issue after that. A brilliant, brilliant all-round John Deere, and a very, very important one at the time as well. When you were looking for that extra little bit of horsepower, that, stockmen and tillage men were looking for, and there was a good crossover between the two. And for the bigger machines that were coming with the new range, with the R range that were coming into the 195R and the 210R and stuff like that, it would have been, they would have been preceded the 7530. So that's number 7. And of course, if anyone disagrees, this is my lineup, this is my list, this is what I think, what I believe from everything I've read. There's going to be people that say I wouldn't have that because I had one of those and it was a ball of shit, but like you could say that about every tractor, there's good ones and there's bad ones, but you take them in the general all around. This is the lineup that I'm going with. But if you disagree, if you want to take something out and put something else in, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. So number 6, again, one of the very most famous and most popular John Deere's ever built was the 4020. Now, obviously, there wasn't too many of them in Ireland or in the UK or in around Europe, but in America, the 4020, the first of the real diesel-powered tractors, and these were a beautiful looking, with that lovely horseshoe bonnet, beefy looking back end on them. Most of them were open station, but a beautiful looking tractor, and I had one as a child, a cast iron one that my dad got in John Deere or someplace. A beautiful, beautiful machine. Yeah, it was that 6.6 litre diesel engine, so the 404, that very famous 404 engine, and there was a 5.9 litre gas engine either. 90 horsepower, 8-speed, full and partial power shift. Production run 1963 to 1972. So it was, there was a lot of fanfare about the introduction of the 4020s and what it meant for John Deere at the time. And with the advent of diesel taking over from the gas machines, obviously, it was very, very important. And one of the first to come with 4-wheel drive as well. So it was available with hydraulic 4-wheel drive. And as I said, very distinguishable with that horseshoe bonnet. And there was something around 180,000 4020s built. However, many of them ended up over this side of the water. I know there are a few of them knocking about. Collectors and that have them. I don't know how many of them are around, but there are a few around. But 180,000 of a production run. Another one of my favourites then is the 7920. So the 7920, that 8.1 litre, absolutely bomb-proof engine. Unless you abused it or didn't change the oil in it, the 8.1 litre would go forever. 6-cylinder turbo, obviously. Auto power only at 205 horsepower. Command center cab that was in the 7000s and the 8000s, and they were a beautifully spacious, roomy cab with loads of room for your legs, loads of room for your lunchbox, loads of room behind the seat. Good swivel on the seat, and very, very simple machine to drive in auto power. Everything was at your fingertips and easy to control. Comfortable enough on the road. It wasn't really a road tractor, although it did come with front suspension. It wasn't really built for the road, they were built for the fields. American tractor, obviously, and it had that 8.1 litre engine, and that is what distinguishes the 7920 from the 7930. So what John Deere thought they were doing when they put the 7.6 litre into the 7930, I don't understand why they went away from the 8.1 litre engine. It just doesn't make sense to me. So the 7930 that would have replaced the 7920 didn't have the 8.1 litre, had the 7.6, and it was a little bit of a gutless replacement for the 7920. Can be picked up very, very reasonably priced. They are a reasonably priced tractor to pick up secondhand because they do only come in auto power. But I do have a feeling the prices of them will be going up, especially after Garrett from Grassman has picked up one to add to his collection, and dicky it up. I think that the price of them will be going up a little bit. There will be a little bit more of a demand for them because they are an iconic machine. Though they're a John Deere tractor that's probably overlooked when it comes to people's memories and thoughts. And it was hard for me to to decide on this position. Number 5, 7920. I was tossed up between another very famous John Deere, but the 7920 for me just pips it. So yeah, production run from 04 to 07. So next on the list, number 4, and this is one that you could easily put at number 1, but for a couple of little issues. That was the 2850. 2850 in Europe and Ireland and the UK obviously was hugely successful and probably one of the most loved John Deere's ever made. 3.9 litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine at 86 horsepower. Very, very high torque. The one thing about them, they would pull and pull and pull and pull. You could put 10 ton of grain behind it or 12 ton of grain, and you could hit a hill, and you had the power synchron, or the power, that clutchless shift in them, power synchron as John Deere calling it, or multi-power if someone else wants to call it, whatever. And they would just keep on pulling. They were a brilliant, fantastic little machine. Just as happy in the field with a 3 or a 4 plough behind it as it would be scraping out a yard or mowing silage or drawing silage. Comfortable on the road, although, a lot of people did complain about the cabs and a lot of people did not like the SG2 cab and the size of it. I grew up driving them. 2850 is the tractor I learned to properly drive and that I drove most when I was a teenager. 2850. I spent all my days driving 28 and 2650s on the SG2 cab, and I'm 6 foot tall, and I was always pretty comfortable in them. Although I wasn't big, but I can't imagine my dad and my uncles are a lot bigger than me, and it would have been a little bit more uncomfortable for them. But at the time in the 80s, the SG2 cab was probably the best cab on the market. A lot of people didn't, obviously, as I spoke before when I was talking about the 50 series, the split down the windscreen. A lot of people didn't like that. Some people didn't bother, but most tractors at that stage, you had an exhaust split in your view anyway. So the split in the cab down to one side, it didn't bother me. It definitely didn't obstruct any views or anything. Did a couple of little issues, as I spoke about before, with the hydraulic systems, and that if they were abused a little bit too much, or a little bit too much was expected of them, the hydraulics were a little bit gave a little bit of trouble, and you had to know how to fix them. Good thing about them, yeah, they had a fantastic range of cabs. There was a 2850 for everybody, so you could have the CC2 or the MC1 cab, which would have been popular with the stockmen, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, obviously the SG2 cab, and then you had an SG2 low profile cab, and you had various positions of the gear levers. Obviously up on the right hand column was the most popular in the SG2, or down between your legs on the low profile one. And then obviously the MC1 and the CC2 cab was the more budget cab at the time. Obviously 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel. 2-wheel drives were just as popular, and because it made them so maneuverable, because the 4-wheel drive were very maneuverable as well. It was a great with that caster angle on the steering. There was a great lock on them. But 2850 for me is at number 4. Although I did, I was, pushing to get it to number 1, but there was just a couple of little faults in it that I just said, nah, I just leave number 4. It's a good position for the 2850. Number 3 for me then, and probably my favorite John Deere that I've ever driven, and as I've spoken about before on the channel, is the 8410. So that 8000 series, that large frame 8410 that took over from the 8400, obviously, with the 8.1 litre 6-cylinder turbocharged engine at approximately 270 horsepower. 16-speed power shift, which was an absolute pleasure to use until it went out of calibration. It got a little bit jumpy, but once you calibrated them, they were sweet. Production run was 99 to 02, so it had a short enough production run, and it would have been replaced by the 8420 command center cab with that lovely wasp waist design. So the bonnet kind of narrowed in towards the windscreen, which gave you this beautiful view out the right and the left hand side from that command center cab, which was an absolute joy to spend a day in. And I've spent thousands and thousands of hours in an 8410 ploughing, mainly a little bit of road work. I wouldn't recommend them for the road. They're a little bit hoppy, a little bit bouncy, a little bit slow for the road, but as regards putting them in a field, putting them to work at heavy draft, it was hard to beat an 8410 with a 7 for a reversible behind, 6, 7, 8 for a reversible, just as comfortable. They will pull all day long at 9-10 kilometers an hour, and it will not take a peep out of them. Downsides on them, as I said, slow on the road, a little bit slow on the road. You get 30 kilometers an hour out of them, and that's about the height of it. A little bit more maybe if you had her screwed out right to the end. 32 kilometers an hour. They're slow on the road. Other than that, the hitch in the back, they had a hitch in the back, it left them a little bit low on the ground, or a little bit low on the ground, so the hitch, it would tend to drag if you were on wet ground. It would kind of belly on the ground, but it wasn't really an issue. Other than that, it's hard to fault an 8410. They're just with that 8.1 litre engine and that transmission, which is pretty bomb-proof as well. They are a fantastic machine. So moving on to number 2, and this is a position that was so hard for me because I was torn between 2 different tractors, and I picked the 4455. So the 4455 with the 7.6 litre turbocharged engine with a 15-speed power shift transmission, 150 horsepower with the 466 engine, superb engine. Again, all these John Deere engines back then were pretty much bulletproof. And that 7.6 litre engine is the same engine that you would find in the 47 and the 4955. Why did I pick them? They're just a little bit too big. They are not as much of an all-rounder as a 4455. And a lot of 4455s were screwed up to about the 200 horsepower to put out the same horsepower as a 47 or a 4955. And to have them then on a power harrow or a rotavator, they were a much nicer machine than having the bigger tractor on it. Obviously, the 49s had the size behind them for managing a bigger plough, for traction and stuff like that. But the 4455 was a beautiful all-rounder when it came to tillage work, ploughing, rotavating, power harrowing, sowing. Stick a set of dual wheels on it there and they will go anywhere. And again, the SG2 cab and the power shift transmission and that 7.6 litre engine, which is dynamite. I don't mean to blow up, but sorry, I meant to say they're a diamond. I didn't mean to say dynamite. They don't blow up. They're a superb engine, as most John Deere engines are, other than a few of them that give a little bit of trouble. Anyway, but the 4455, I had the 4440 down initially because, you know, when you talk to John Deere enthusiasts, John Deere, you know, die-hard John Deere men, they will always, especially the Americans, they will always say, oh, the 4440. But the 4440 didn't come in mechanical four-wheel drive. You could get it in hydraulic four-wheel drive, which, you know, was downside, but most of them were two-wheel drive. But everything that was good about the 4440 is in the 4455. Obviously you went to the 4450, but the 55 was just that little step ahead, just the right amount of comfort, right amount of little bits of electronics in them on the dash, and that a lovely comfortable place to spend a day, which I spent many a day in a 4455. Yeah, so that got my number 2. If I was going out tomorrow to buy an old John Deere, it would probably be a 4455, if not a 4350. One or the other. If I could get my hand on one or the other of those, and nice 4350s are rare, but 4455, yeah, I would take one any day. So who can guess my number 1? I've left out one John Deere, obviously. You know, some people might be thinking it's one, some might be thinking it's the other, or you might be thinking it's a different one, a third, but it's not a 3650. No, it's not a 3650 was left out. 3650 was left out for a couple of reasons. 3650 for me, obviously, it's a super machine, very popular machine. People look at them now though with rose tinted glasses. I know a couple of lads that have bought them back to do them up and to restore them, but I do remember the same people at the time talking about how, you know, they had 3650s and, you know, they had them apart more times than they had them in the field, and they were giving out about them. But now all of a sudden they're buying them back and they're restoring them and doing them up and talking about them, because, as you know, most people would be familiar with John Deere, 3650s had their hydraulic problems. They were made do a little bit more than what they were built to do, and that's what happened. They were 118 horsepower, and they were turned up to maybe 130 horsepower, 140 horsepower, whatever people paid with the pump. And it just put too much pressure on the hydraulics, too much pressure on the brakes, too much pressure on everything. And, you know, they did give hydraulic problems, and that was their biggest downfall. Great engine, turbocharged engine, plenty of power, plenty of torque, but they were made to do a little bit more than what they were designed to do. And that's the main reason. And that's not the tractor's fault, you know, that's, you know, just down, but they didn't like being abused, and for that reason the 3650 was left out. Most people that bought them in the 80s and later when they came into the the 90s, the last one of them was built in 93. It would have been tillage men buying them, and they would have been putting them in big plows, or they would have been going out to do heavy silage work with them, put them in a silage harvester, and they really got worked. So that's why I didn't pick the 3650. 6910. I was close to picking a 6910. I was, and 6910 is not on the list. And people are saying, how can it be a list of top 10 without having the 6910 on it? For a couple of reasons. 6910 is obviously an iconic machine now, a fantastic tractor, but there's nothing in the 6920. There's not in the 6910. Very similar machine. 6920 is a more comfortable cab. It's it's got suspension, and I know some of the 6910s did as well. But I do like them. Don't get me wrong, but I do think they're a little bit overrated. They're a fantastic machine, but they're a little bit overrated. And I wouldn't be that bothered if I never had one. But the 10 series obviously was one of the best series that John Deere ever made, because I have the 8410 in the list. But anyway, number one, stop talking bullshit. Number one is obviously the 7810. So I don't think too many can disagree with me when I say the 7810 is probably the best John Deere ever made. Now I know there's a lot of maybe Americans going to be looking at this and they're going to be spitting at the screen or whatever. But again, the 8.1 litre 6-cylinder turbocharged engine, it came in either auto power, power quad, or power shift transmission. So you had a good range of transmission choices: 16-speed power quad, or 20-speed power quad. You had auto power, and then you had power shift. And for anyone that's asking, the auto power in the 7810 never gave trouble. It didn't give trouble. Easy to work on. Very little went wrong with them. One or two little things. They had a tendency, if you didn't mind the shields on the exhaust coming up the right hand pillar, if you didn't look after the shields, that the battery could catch fire. And the other thing was, there was a short shaft in between the gearbox and the engine that supplies power to the engine, or sorry, to the transmission. There was a little short shaft in there, and they used to go on them, and when they go, they break, and they might wrap a few hydraulic hoses up in a heap underneath the cab. But if the tractor was serviced properly and that shaft was checked at every service, there would never be an issue with them. It was just ones that were neglected that happened to, as was the issue with the exhaust. It's because they were neglected. Now, when I say some of them went on fire, some of them melted the transmission, or melted the battery box, and you just put your shields on, away you go again. Built from 97 to 2003, I think it was. The later ones came 50k air brakes, left-hand reverse on the later models, and you had TLS models and you had non-TLS. But when it came to reliability, when it came to comfort, when it came to sound, if you're working a 7810 and you had the right-hand window cracked open and you were just listening to the tone of that exhaust, it'd just give you shivers. Like, they're a fantastic machine, very reliable. They were worked hard, but they did put up with it. They would be just as comfortable on a big square baler as they would be with a maybe a 1360 mower or something behind them. They were a very nimble machine. What more can I say? There was great comfort in them, and you just knew that you had a machine that when you went out into a field, it wasn't going to break down, and it was going to do what you set out to do. Came with comfort seats, air seats, whatever you wanted, it was there. And the price in the second-hand ones, good clean second-hand ones, now when you look at what they're making, that kind of says it all about them. They're highly sought after. There is a lot of them out there. They're highly sought after. So maybe one day I'll get my hands on another one of them, and we'll see, because people had them back then, they traded them in, they didn't think twice about them, but they are, if you have one out, money in the bank. So that's it. That's my top 10. I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed that the 3650 is not there, the 6910 is not there. So look, that's it. What can I say? 4440 is not there either. So what can I say? The 7810 is my number one. when I look at, you know, a lot of factors. So please, what have I got wrong? What do you think is your top 10? What is your number one John Deere? And for those of you that are watching that might be Massey fans, please help me out in next month's top 10. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you all next weekend. Thanks.